Hello, 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 and welcome to tonight's edition of Agrilachia. We're running just a tad behind. I'm always struggling with technology and getting this thing to turn on when it needs to. But we're so excited to be with everybody tonight. And please do us a favor, hit that share button, share this out with some friends. We have a wonderful, wonderful speaker tonight. We have Sheri Castle, and she's going to be making some of the absolute best Christmas candy you can even imagine. You're going to be salivating before you know it. We'll have the recipes over here in the comment bar here momentarily. But before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to the National Endowment for the Humanities. That's who's made this possible and this whole series possible. So we really like to send our appreciations to NEH and the and to Kentucky's Humanities. That way, they ensure that we're able to do this each and every month. And look for our spring roster coming out really soon. We've been working on that and got another really awesome lineup. But tonight we have with us Sheri Castle. She's an award-winning professional food writer, recipe developer, and cooking teacher. The Southern Foodways Alliance named Sheri among 20 living legends of Southern food, calling her the storyteller. The description of her contributions said, she has revealed herself to be our best advocate for the rich history of Southern home cooking. Sheri grew up in Watauga County in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina and lives in Farrington Village now. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Miss Sheri Castle.
Everybody. Jason, thank you for those kind words, and thank you everyone that's tuning in tonight. It's always humbling and a little disconcerting to hear descriptions of yourself in such effusive ways. And although I do appreciate it, every time I listen to those kind words, I think of a time many years ago when my daughter was in middle school and got up to make a presentation. And after the introduction, she said, "Ladies and gentlemen, my reputation exceeds me." So I think that may be the paradigm I'm in now. But even though I do make recipes for a living, I am sharing with you tonight just as another home cook. I want to show you some recipes I have made in my own home over the years around Christmas, and including a couple that date back to when I was a little girl, something that my grandmother made. So I'm going to be making a total of 3 things this evening, and I chose these recipes, first of all, because they are delicious. But second of all, because they are easy. You don't have to have a candy thermometer or any special equipment or anything like that. So I'm going to be switching among them a little bit to have them time out the same way, but none of them are very hard. And the very first one is what I call secret ingredient toffee. Now, it goes by a number of different names, but it is a sort of a faux toffee. And it is made, I'll just let the cat out of the bag. The spoiler right up front is the secret ingredient is saltine crackers. I have deep personal affection for any kind of a recipe that includes saltines as an ingredient, not as just a side, as an ingredient. Now, I always think about how popular crackers were even in kitchens out in the country many years ago, because it was something you didn't have to make from scratch. So what I've done to begin with is I have taken a sleeve of saltine crackers and just put them on my baking sheet. Now, I've lined this baking sheet with parchment paper, but you can use aluminum foil. But you do want to line your pan with something, because when this sets up, it will become one with the pan if you don't have some paper or something in there. So I said, these are just plain old saltines. And in my saucepan, I have a cup of butter, and I have a cup of firmly packed brown sugar. Now, I'm using light brown sugar, but you can use dark brown sugar if you wanted to for this. And I'm going to bring it up to a good rolling boil. And I should say that I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees, because these babies are going to cook for a little while in the oven. But you do want to bring your brown sugar and your butter mixture to a good boil and stir until that sugar's dissolved. It'll get a little bubbly, and then we're going to pour it over the top of the crackers. Now, I will say that butter is the way to go here. A lot of times we used to just interchange margarine, butter, or what have you, but the butter not only adds flavor to this, it really is sort of the secret flavor to a good toffee. And if you try to make it with something else, you're going to lose that toffee edge. So when the mixture in your saucepan basically looks like molten lava, which is about what I have here, I am going to pour it over the top of these saltine crackers. Just a gentle pour and trying to get some on all of the crackers. Now, some of the crackers are going to maybe want to try to float away a little bit. Don't you worry about that. Once you've got them all of your mixture on top, you can take the tip of a knife or something or your spatula and scoop any ones that want to float back into place. And if you need to take a spatula and wring a little bit of this toffee mixture, you kind of spread it like you're laying grout to make sure it covers all of the crackers. That's okay too. So I've got these covered up, so we've already done that quick, and I'm going to put them in my 350-degree oven for 15 minutes. And in the oven, this sugar mixture, because we've only cooked it on top of the stove enough to dissolve, melt the butter and dissolve the sugar, in the oven, it's going to actually caramelize. And that just means you're really cooking those sugars. And it's going to get to a really hot, bubbly temperature that approximates what you would do if you were making real toffee completely on top of the stove and having to use a candy thermometer. So let me put this in my oven. I'm going to set my timer for my 15 minutes. And then when it comes out after the 15 minutes, I'm going to put some chocolate on top. I'm going to do that for you. You'll see that. I'm using bittersweet chocolate to balance the sweetness a little bit, but you can use another kind of chocolate if you want. You can use semi-sweet morsels. You can use one of those amazing flavored morsels that now there's some that are like salted caramel or some that are butterscotch or peanut butter, but the traditional combination of this was the saltines, your butter and brown sugar mixture, and then some chocolate on top and some nuts. So that's what's coming later. But while that's in the oven, we're going to keep the ball rolling, and I'm going to start my next candy. I'm going to reuse your pan, off the same pan. Let me, if you excuse me a minute, bring up my next group of ingredients. And that's what I've got for now. So what I have is I am going to take, excuse me again just a minute. In this bowl right here, I have a jar, or 2 cups, it's actually a little bit more than a jar, of marshmallow fluff. Now, let me tell you what I'm going to make. I'm not going to make you guess here at the end. This is what is called $1 million fudge, or in most circles, Mamie Eisenhower fudge. And as I'm cooking things, I will tell you how it became so strongly associated with Mamie Eisenhower. But we're going to start out with some marshmallow fluff. It comes in jars, and it used to be, you could say, buy a certain size jar and use that. But jar sizes have changed over the years, and it may, depending on the brand you buy, take 1 jar or 2 jars or a jar and a half. But basically, it is 2 cups of your marshmallow fluff. And then I have 2 kinds of chocolate. One is semi-sweet chocolate, and you can use either chocolate chips or morsels or whatever they're called. Or what I did is I bought bars of semi-sweet chocolate and chopped it up. And then the other part of this is German's chocolate, the chocolate we use in a great German chocolate cake. By the way, that has nothing to do with the country of Germany. It has a lot to do with the fact that the man who invented it, his last name was German. So that's where that came from. And I'm going to mix those 2 things together in a great big bowl. And then I'm going to make a cooked mixture on top of the stove. This is 4½ cups of sugar. Yes, this is very sweet, and yes, this is a whole lot, but we're going to make 2 pounds of fudge, and then put in a couple of tablespoons of butter. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, should I use salted or unsalted butter? And in these kinds of recipes, I say use what you have. I actually like salted butter. I like that little bit of saltiness, which is actually not a lot at all in these sorts of recipes. But this isn't something like a really delicate cake or a butter cookie or a butter sauce where that bit of salt is going to make a difference. So just use what you have. I like salted butter to the point I actually put another pinch of salt in my mixture. And then my liquid is a wonderful favorite that my grandmother could not have raised us all to adulthood without, and this is canned milk. Some of us call it pet milk, even when it's not the pet brand. That's just what we call it. And what this milk is evaporated milk. And that just means that it is milk that is processed to take about 40% of the water that would just be in, 2 cups of milk if you poured it in a measuring cup, and has this wonderful rich flavor to it and almost a little bit of natural sweetness. Now, it's not sweetened, but it concentrates the lactose. This is evaporated milk. There's another product called sweetened condensed milk, what we often call Eagle brand. And you want to make sure if you've got a recipe, not just for this, but for any other holiday sweets or desserts you might be making, that you know when it's evaporated versus sweetened condensed, because they're always on the shelf next to one another, and they're not, you can't replace one with the other. So I'm going to bring this mixture, grab my spatula, up to a boil. And it too, a bit like we did with our coffee, our toffee, we got to get this good and bubbling and hot, because the heat of this mixture is what's going to melt all of that chocolate and all of that marshmallow fluff that is in the big bowl. So I'm just going to stir here for a minute. And while I'm stirring, I promised I would get back to what on earth Mamie Eisenhower had to do with all of this. What Mamie had to do with it is she did apparently actually make it, but there was a woman's magazine back when she was the first lady, and I suppose it still goes on, but it seemed like used to, there was a lot of requests for, the governor's wife or the mayor's wife or, whoever it was, to submit a recipe to local newspapers and to women's journals and so forth. And one year she was asked to contribute a candy recipe. Don't know if it was for Christmas, but it could have been. And she submitted this fudge. And at the time it came out, it was very modern. It was very cutting edge because it contained marshmallow fluff, which was just, very sophisticated, considered, cutting edge, a modern day marvel and so forth. But it wasn't something so expensive that the average household couldn't afford it. And so she turned in this fudge, and it became so strongly associated with her that her name went on it. Well, I did some digging, like, is this really true? Did she really do all of this? Did she have anything to do with it? Or is this just one of those wonderful urban legends that we attach to things? Well, she did not invent this fudge. This actually probably came from the Marshmallow Fluff Company. It was known as $1 Million. It was so rich, it was worth $1 million. That was back when $1 million was really $1 million. But they did find a copy of it in her own handwriting that they could authenticate to the point that in the Eisenhower Presidential Library, there is a copy of her little blue recipe card in her handwriting with this recipe in there. I just love that. So I'm stirring, I'm waiting for this to come up to a boil, and watch pots never boil. So I just got to stir here for a minute, because if it's not hot enough, it won't melt this chocolate. So what I did before is you make this in a 9 by 13 pan. Now, I am deliberately using a giftable pan, a disposable pan. You want something heavy. You wouldn't want to put this in, say, a paper, one of those paper giveaway candy things. You want something sturdy enough it could go in the oven. It doesn't. But you want sturdy enough that it could go in the oven. I like this kind of pan because it comes with a lid for easy storage, and you can make a gift out of this. Now, clearly, could you cut this recipe in half? and make only half. Could you make it in smaller containers? You can. Now, I did not know that this was mayonnaise Eisenhower fudge for a long time. I knew it looked familiar, and I knew it tasted familiar. This is what my grandmother and my family called plate candy, because instead of putting it in a 9x13, which I'm not even sure she owned, she had these beautiful Christmas plates that were deep enough that she could pour this candy in there. And that was always, those plates only came out when it was Christmas. The way you knew it was Christmas in Watauga County, those plates came out of the cabinet and the candied fruit was at the Winn-Dixie. That's how we knew it was a change of the seasons. And then before long, the mechanical Santa Claus would go into one department store that was downtown. So this has now come up to a really good boil. And you can do one of two things. You can either pour the hot into the chocolate, or you can pour the chocolate mixture into the saucepan, but you want to do that off the heat. So I am going to pour over and then stir and stir and stir and stir and stir. And once you get this stirred, you are over the hump. It is basically ready to go in that pan. Now, you can either butter that pan or you can mist it with a non-stick cooking spray. And we all know that those sprays can work, but they make an unbelievable mess in your kitchen floor. So I'm going to tell you a little tip and hint just between me and you that I do every time. When I have to spray a cake pan or my candy pan or some sort of a pan with non-stick spray, I either put it in the sink if it'll fit. If not, I lower the door on my dishwasher and put the pan in there so that it will collect all that overspray, the inevitable overspray, and that way it's not all over the floor. Because I don't know about you guys, but I have slid on that stuff to the point you would think I was auditioning for the Winter Olympics. This, I'm just stirring and stirring and stirring. And how I know is when all the chocolate is melted and when there are no little floating icebergs of my marshmallow fluff, that it's good. Now, when you buy your German's chocolate in your semi-sweet chocolate or chocolate for any recipe where you hope in the end you've got a really nice, non-grainy, non-gritty chocolate, and especially if you're going to be coating something. Let's say we were making Buckeyes, those peanut butter candies, and you want the chocolate to be shiny. When you open the bar or the bag of chocolate, everything should be dark. If you ever open in solid, no gray spots, no cloudy spots, no waxy spots. If you've ever opened up a bar or a bag of chocolate and they have this gray film on the outside, it doesn't mean the chocolate has gone bad. What it means is that at some point in your house, at the grocery store, on the way home or whatever, that chocolate got warm enough that some of the cocoa butter melted and rose to the surface. And then when it re-solidified and cooled back off, there was that little bit of that cocoa butter that makes a film on the top. It doesn't affect the taste, but it can often make the chocolate not as shiny. So when looks matter, you want to look out for that. So I have this now stirred. If I were dexterous enough to use both hands, this could be my upper body workout today. So that, and then I am going to pour this into my prepared pan. And it does make a lot. This makes, like I said, a good 2 pounds of this candy. And then here's the thing. For those of you that have made and love to make, quote, real fudge, there is a long and tedious and persnickety process of bringing it up to temperature and lowering it down and bringing it up and lowering it down to avoid it being grainy. With this, the only thing you've got to remember to do to avoid it being grainy is sit this in a spot where it can be totally still for at least 12 hours, preferably 24. The more you move it around, the more likely it is to get grainy and to get these cracks on top. So the whole secret to this recipe is use good chocolate and put it in a spot where nobody can get to it for a good 24 hours. That's it. Now, I did not put nuts in this nuts are an option, and it can be any kind of nuts you want. Some people really want nuts in there. Some people don't. So if you want to put nuts in there, you put a couple of cups of nuts. You could use walnuts or black walnuts. Some of us mountain people love black walnuts. Other people think they taste like they've turned. You could use pecans. You could use almonds, peanuts, whatever you like. But I'm going to leave this one without it. And let me move it out of the way.
Sheri, someone's wondering how much of each type of chocolate did you add?
It's 12 ounces of each one. These recipes are going to be available, but it's equal amounts, 12 ounces of each one. Now, if you go with morsels, that used to be exactly one bag of chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are suffering product shrinkage this year because every bag I bought has held only 10 ounces. So when you go shopping, make sure, not only for these recipes, but for others, make sure that you are looking at the weight and the volume because they have gone down and you don't want to come home and have to make another trip to the store. But it's 12 ounces of each. So I just took back to our toffee, my crackers that are now in this bubbling lava-like. I think that's pretty much the temperature of the sun right now. So you want to make sure you're very careful with it, this hot thing, and I'm going to take my bittersweet chocolate and I'm just going to sprinkle these over the top of my crackers. And don't worry about it getting even. You don't want to dump them all in one spot, but we're going to put this back in the oven for about 60 seconds, just enough to encourage these chocolate chips to melt. And then I'm going to show you how you spread that out. Talk about products that aren't the size they used to be. When I started making this 110 years ago, one sleeve of saltines would barely fit on the cookie sheet. Saltines are so much smaller now that they don't even fill up the cookie sheet, but it's still, everything else works. I'm going to put this back in for 1 minute. And in that 1 minute, does anybody have any other questions right now? Because we've got to talk about something for this 1 minute because I don't want to start the other recipe yet. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope, so far it's just
looking like no. So I know what I can do. No, I don't still think. I was going to say, talking about black walnuts and so forth. Black walnuts were always something that we picked up at my grandparents' house. A lot of us grew up with black walnut trees in our neighborhood or in our yards and so forth. And I think that one of the reasons we have such a strong association of nuts with holiday cooking is it's not like we can't buy them in the store year-round, but back when we were gathering up our own walnuts and pecans in every yard, those were a fall crop. Literally, it fell out of trees that were a windfall crop in the fall. And the fresher the nuts, the more delicious they are. So they were always the best tasting through the holidays, which made them even more of a great treat.
Patrick wants to know where you got your spatula.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to tell you about the spatula. Patrick is not my plant. I don't even know who Patrick is, but I got two of these things. I got a big one and a not quite so big one. These are made by OXO, that company, and I love them because they're made out of silicone, which means I can put them into something up, I think it's 600 or 800 degrees, and they're stiff enough I can stir, but they are soft enough you can spread. Like you can frost a cake, you can scrape a bowl, you can put them in the dishwasher. And again, I don't work for this company, but I love these spatulas so much, and they'll fit down in a food processor. And I got them, I don't know, someplace that sells cooking gadgets. I didn't have to order them, didn't have to go to special. I mean, it was just someplace that carries OXO stuff. They're great, so thank you for asking. And now I think, because I got to extol my glee with those spatulas, I can take my chocolate out, and I'm going to show you another kind of spatula that can come in really handy. This baby is called an offset spatula. This is a little one. If I can hold this, you can see there is a little bit of a dip from the handle down to the blade. And it's designed a lot of times to like frost a cake or go around the edges. But it also, because it's flatter, means that you can use it to spread things. So all I'm doing, and this chocolate is perfectly smooth now, is I'm taking this spatula, or I could use my OXO, and I'm just taking those melted chocolate chips, and I'm spreading that evenly over the top of the crackers, which the crackers have now, they're pretty much into, you can't even hardly tell they're crackers because they're under all that gooding. And since I did not put nuts in the Mamie Eisenhower fudge, I'm definitely going to put nuts on this. You can put nuts, you could put crushed peppermint candies, you could put, you know, some sort of, you could put baby M&Ms, you could put anything you want on top for a little bit of crunch, but I'm going to use nuts, and I am using pecans. And I used to put whole nuts, but I found this is actually easier to handle if you use a relatively finely chopped nuts. So when you're in the store, you'll notice that there are, at least at the holidays, there's pecan pieces, there's whole pecans, and then they call this chopped pecans. But if you don't buy that, you can take whatever kind of nut and chop them up however you like. But you want to sprinkle whatever your final thing is on while this chocolate is still warm enough that it's going to soak up a little bit. And this is done except for letting it sit. And it too needs to sit until it cools off. It doesn't have to sit as long as the Mamie Eisenhower fudge, which takes 12 to 24 hours. This just needs to cool off. We're talking an hour. You want to resist the temptation of putting it in the refrigerator, because although it won't affect the taste, it will make that chocolate really dull, and it just, you know, you work so hard to make it pretty, you don't want to undo it. So let me show you what it looks like when it is all done. And then what you do next. So I made this yesterday. And all you have to do to have this ready to serve is to take your parchment or something and pick it up enough to loosen a corner, and then you just break it into pieces. You can break it into great big pieces. You can break it into itty bitty pieces. You can break it into whatever size that you like. And see, it's complete. You can barely see the crackers in it. I mean, if you look on the side, it actually looks like pie crust. Most people, unless they've made this, won't know it's saltines. And it doesn't taste like saltines. They taste like toffee, except that tiny bit of the salt on the saltines is delicious. You can decide, you can play games with yourself. You can say, like, anything that's this big, I'll put in the container. Anything that's this small, I'll just eat it while nobody's looking. That's up to you, however you want to bargain with yourself. Now, this will keep at room temperature for several days. Some people, again, put it in the refrigerator to make it last longer. I'm not crazy about what that does to it. Like it is, it kind of makes the chocolate ugly, and I think it makes it a little bit chewy. But if that doesn't bother you, you can do it. But I generally put it in something airtight, either on, you know, old-fashioned tin or some Tupperware, and it makes a bunch. I mean, I'm not going to break up the rest of it. You've got the idea. Y'all can break it apart. But this is a great treat. It's not very expensive. It makes a good gift, even with the youngest children. Now, they can't be around the hot boiling chocolate sugar, but even little kids can put the crackers on the tray. It's a good family activity. Does anybody have any questions about that part? I know I talk fast, especially to be a Southerner.
No questions so far, but you got several very pro black walnut comments.
You know, people that love black walnuts, my technical assistant saying I got many pro black walnut comments. I love black walnuts. I didn't like them when I was a kid. I think they were too strong for me, and nobody's ambivalent about them. You either love them and consider them in and of themselves a special occasion, or you're not crazy about it. I think one of the reasons that beyond the flavor some of us like them is they're so hard to get into. I mean, it's like breaking a G egg, or it's like busting gravel or something. And, you know, there are all these contraptions. I know I had one uncle that had this sort of a lever-driven thing that would crack them. Some people would take a couple of rocks or a couple of bricks. When my granddaddy got older and didn't have the hand strength he once did, he would put them on the carport and drive the lawn mower, the lawn tractor back and forth. And, you know, it'll make a black stain on your hands, a kind of this brownish black stain on your hands. on the pavement or whatever it is. And I described them one time that if you were to come up on that scene, it would become like a crime scene. You might not know what happened, but you knew where it happened. It happened right here. That's what black walnuts will do. So I'm glad that some of you love them too, because I just think they are fantastic. So I'm going to set this away, and I'm going to show you some finished Mamie Eisenhower fudge, and then it's already ready for the last recipe. But please, if anybody has any more black walnut stories or questions about anything, please let us know. Let me know.
Beth highly recommends the black walnut liqueur, apparently, is a thing.
There is a black walnut, yes, and there are people, I have friends that are trying to make their own now. There is a walnut, not black walnut, but a walnut liqueur that's very popular in Italy, and they're taking that process and making the black walnut. It is delightful. You're correct. It is absolutely delightful. So, day later, this is the Mamie Eisenhower fudge that I made yesterday morning. And I did not put the plastic wrap on it until it was cooled. You want to let it cool off completely, and then you can put that on top if you wish, or you can use your lid. And then you can cut it into cubes, or you can put it out for people to take what they want. When my grandmother's plate candy, she just put out a big spoon, and we just, when we wandered by, I was like, I think I'll have me a bite of that. We just took the spoon and kind of scraped off what we wanted. But it makes a beautiful texture when it's done. Now, I'm going to cut out a little cube, but I'll tell you another thing. If you're feeling fancy and you've got the patience, because you got to know yourself. You got to know whether you got the patience for this. If you want this in different shapes, you can take little sharp-edged metal miniature cookie cutters, like a star or a bell or a square or a circle, and you can actually stamp out pieces of this fudge in certain shapes. Or you can take a knife and just cut out a piece. And the texture is really amazing. I mean, it's almost foolproof. I've learned not to say everything's foolproof because we know better. But it's really creamy and shiny. It's not gritty like some cooked fudges are that are really gritty. And it's very rich. I mean, if you cut out 1-inch cubes, which is about what this is, you're going to get over 100 pieces out of this. So it's no harder to make the 2-pound amount as it is a smaller amount. So I always make that amount, and then you can dole this out and put it in tins or boxes or whatever. Or if somebody's been really good and you really like them, you can put a lid on this and give them the whole 2 pounds for it. So that is Mamie Eisenhower fudge, also known as $1 Million Fudge or Millionaire Fudge, or my mama's plate candy, however you look at it. Any questions about that from anybody? Like I said, the whole thing, use good chocolate and don't jiggle it for the first. And if you do jiggle it, what's going to happen? It won't be an edible, but it gets these little fissures in it. It has little like crusty bits and so forth. Now, if you don't tell anybody that's a flaw, it can be between us. You can act like, wow, I sure made that extra special rippled fudge or whatever. But if you leave it sitting, say, on top of the refrigerator, I got a story right quick. All right. So when family recipes come down, if you've inherited a family recipe or you're going to leave a family recipe or whatever, if there's a story that goes with that, like, I was telling you guys about the plates and the spoon and all that, but if there's a story with a recipe that makes it special to your family, either who gave it to you or how it was served or who did it well or who did it poorly, that's part of a family recipe that is the lore that goes with it. So me saying putting this someplace where nobody can bother it for a day, I'm going to tell you all a story. So my childhood best friend, she many years ago asked me, said, do you know how to make banana pudding? And I said, yes, I do. She said, can you tell me? I'm like, yes, I can. So I was telling her about the banana pudding, and we went through the whole recipe, and we were talking all this, and she said, when do you put it on top of the refrigerator? I said, do you mean in the refrigerator? She goes, no, when do you put it on top of the refrigerator? I'm like, I don't. She goes, oh, you got to do that. My mom always put it on top of the refrigerator. I'm like, We got to call Margaret and figure out why she did this. So we called her mama. Turns out that she put it on top of the refrigerator to keep Gail's younger brother Barry out of it so he wouldn't eat it before dinner time. So that is the story of their banana pudding. Everybody makes it the same way, but if you put it on the top of the refrigerator to keep somebody's brother out of it, that's what makes it a very special family recipe. So make that part go with it too. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to show you actually the easiest thing I've done all evening. So this last one is sort of Christmas candy and sort of special occasion candy all the way around. And it's called cream cheese mints. And when I was growing up, you just couldn't get married without these. I mean, you know, yeah, you needed some flowers and you needed this, that, and the other, but basically you needed a nice table with some punch and some good nuts and some cream cheese mints. And I've gotten in the habit of making them for Christmas a whole lot. Now, I'm not going to stir together the dough because I have to turn it on a mixer, although if you've got good elbow grease, you can stir it by hand. But I'm going to show you what I did because I've learned you guys can't hear me over my mixer, but it's super easy. This is a half of an 8-ounce block of cream cheese. This is 4 ounces of cream cheese. And I will tell you, you got to use the real cream cheese. You can't use the non-fat or the reduced fat. You got to get some regular cream cheese. And this is 2 tablespoons of butter. And you're going to put it in a bowl. And then you're going to take a 1-pound box of confectioner sugar. This is something that still comes in the original size. If you buy your sugar in a bag or something, I can't tell you exactly how many cups. You will need to weigh it out to be a pound because I've learned in watching people measure it out of a bag, you don't measure it right and it winds up being the correct amount to make this dough, which is essentially what we're making. So I always just buy the pound box. Now, one of the things that makes powdered sugar so powerful in a lot of recipes is we know that it is very finely pulverized powdered sugar, but there's some cornstarch in powdered sugar, and we know that cornstarch is a thickener. So a lot of times that little bit of cornstarch that's in powdered sugar is the secret to a recipe turning out, and it's certainly the case on this. So you're going to, in a bowl, you're going to you're going to spin up your cream cheese and butter till it's smooth, and then put the powdered sugar in gradually. Like put a cup in first, and then you can put in the rest. And in just a few seconds, it will make this creamy mixture that looks like white cake frosting. And then you can make a decision. If you're making mints, which is what I call this, cream cheese mints, you need to put in some mint extract. It's in the grocery store near where the vanilla is. And in speaking of vanilla, if you want a different flavor, if you don't care for mint or you want some variety, you can put another extract in there, like vanilla or almond or lemon or lavender, but some other kind of extract. And then the other decision that you make at that time, by the way, start with a little and taste it and work up. Some of these extracts are very strongly flavored. You can go over the top from that's pretty good to that's pretty punishing. You can always add more, but it's hard to take it back out. And then you can decide if you want to tint these a color. They're going to be snow white. It's going to look kind of like I said, like white cake frosting. You can put in a food coloring. And this, and you want to do that when you can either divide it into portions, like I want some green ones and some blue ones and some pink ones and some yellow ones, or you can tint it all the same color. And the better thing to use rather than liquid food coloring is this food gel that you used to have to go to, places sold cake decorating supplies, but now a lot of grocery stores have it. The reason that food gels work better than the liquid is it takes very little. Out of 1 or 2 drops of a food gel, you're going to get the tinting power, the dyeing or coloring power of like a half a bottle of food coloring. And food coloring in large amounts can have a bitter taste. And since your cream cheese and powdered sugar mixture is so gently flavored, it can very easily be that when you put enough food coloring in it to color it the way you want, that's what you taste. So food gels are your best friend. So I decided to make mine yesterday a pale green color. And this is what you do. So through the magic of television, we're going to now do these. And after you make your dough, you need to refrigerate it. This is 1/4 of a recipe. I've made the other. So this makes quite a bit. And when you refrigerate it, it turns into this wonderful dough. It's like a thick cookie dough. And now we're going to shape them. I make mine into little balls. Some people put them in candy molds. That never works for me. I just don't have the touch for that. But some people can make, beautiful little shapes. But what I do is I make little balls. And you can either literally eyeball that if you're good at picking out the same amount, or if you want it to be a stickler and have them a little bit more uniform. One of these tiny little scoops works. And I just fill that up and block it on. Again, parchment paper will help. You can use aluminum foil. Parchment paper I just really like a lot. And you're going to get, depending on the size of the balls you make or the shape, you're probably going to get close to 80, 84 out of this. So I'm going to do just a few, because once you get the idea of making the little balls, you've got the idea of making the little balls. And then if they come out a little bit misshapen, with your clean, dry hands, and if you have warm hands, rinse them under some cold water before you do this so you won't get too much stick. Smooth out the little balls, and then you flatten them. Some people use the bottom of a drinking glass. Some people have a pretty little cookie press that might, put some sort of a impression in it. I use a fork. And if it sticks a little bit more, you can put a little powdered sugar. So when you buy your 1 pound box, you also need a little bit more for the rolling. So then I just take my fork tines and I flatten these out till they're about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now you can make them crisscross, or you can do just fork tines. It depends on what kind of pattern you want. I just do mine one good dip. And when you've got them all flattened, you're done. Now, these need to sit. You don't bake them. You don't refrigerate them. They need air, because the air will firm them up so they're still really tender and have that kind of melting in your mouth quality of a well-made mint. And air will do that better. So depending on how much you have, flattened them out, it's going to take 4 hours, preferably overnight. And if you think of them, flip them over midway so that they get good and dry on the bottom too. And then, let me put these out. In about 4 hours, you have 8 dozen, 6, 8 dozen of these gorgeous little mints that you can then stack up. And the little fork tines show in them. They look, really pretty on top. Like I said, you can use the bottom of a drinking glass just to make little discs. Now, if you have got the patience, again, since these are mints, and I did make mint out of these, some people will take some of the chocolate coating, again, like you might put on a buckeye or something, and dip the bottom of these, or even dip all of them in tempered chocolate to make your own peppermint patties and so forth. But they're not too sweet. They're only as flavorful as you make them, either strongly of mint or your other flavor, are very subtle, and they're pretty, and they keep well. And I love tins. I know that Tupperware can work in that, or I don't mean Tupperware, but all those things. But sometimes nothing says homemade more than a good old-fashioned tin that you can give somebody. So that's how easy that is. It's like playing with Play-Doh. And talk about another thing that's good with kids or grandchildren or school children or whatever, the making the little balls and flattening them out, because nothing's hot, it's not too sticky, it's not too expensive. That if the fun of it is like, let them roll half of it out and then throw that away and then eat the other, that's good too. So those are the famous cream cheese mints, and we have made Fuller toffee, or secret ingredient toffee, and we have made 2 pounds of Mamie Eisenhower fudge. We've talked about how much we love black walnuts. I've told a story on my best friend who will not be seeing this, so I got away with it. What questions do you have?
wondering what the shelf life of the mints is.
A long time. They will, at least a week, and they freeze great. They absolutely freeze great. If you want to freeze them, make sure they're good and firm, that you do the air drying part, and then you can put them in a container, a bigger thing, with a layer of wax paper or something between them, and you can freeze those babies for like 3 months. The only thing I've ever seen making bad is if they get hot. Like if you inadvertently sit them someplace that they start getting tacky, you'll wind up with one giant wad of mint. Other questions?
That's all we got in the chat.
That's all we got. Well, I was supposed to talk about an hour, and it's only 45 minutes. So this may be the only time in my life I have talked less time than I was supposed to. So again, I want to give people a chance to either share a comment, share a story, or ask a question. And if there aren't any, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for putting up with me. And I hope you get inspiration in this. If you've got a great Christmas candy or holiday treat, I collect recipes like I collect stories and folk songs. I hope you'll share it with me. And I hope we get to do this again sometime. We'll make something else.
What an absolute delightful evening. I'm just salivating here and thinking, I may change my normal Christmas candy making. I may add a few new recipes. I'm really interested in those mints. So I guess they're kind of like the old butter mints that everybody had at weddings.
They are. They're not as good as the church lady mints. There was always somebody in every church that was like the mint person.
Yep.
They'll do. They don't complete with that, but they'll do just fine.
Awesome. Well, folks, let's put our hands together once again. If you got any other questions, please get them in quickly. But just another wonderful evening with Agrilachia, Miss Sheri Castle. Once again, we thank the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Kentucky Humanities Council for funding this and bringing this on. And hopefully, we'll have Sheri back for another cooking class, and maybe she'll be here in Hindman in person someday.
I would love that.
Awesome, guys. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we will see you all soon.
Bye, all. Good night.
Bye.